Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a classic Arabian fairy tale, The Capseller and the Monkeys. Now, I know what you might be thinking. A story about a guy and some mischievous monkeys sounds like simple folklore, right? But as we unpack this today, you're going to discover a surprisingly practical, very modern lesson about staying cool under immense pressure. So let's just jump right in and see exactly what a humble craftsman can teach us about real-world crisis management. But before we meet our protagonists, I want you to put yourself in a hypothetical scenario. Imagine waking up from a quick nap, stretching, and realizing that absolutely everything you've worked for, your entire inventory, literally your means to buy dinner tonight, has just completely vanished. Gone. Poof. Ask yourself honestly, how would you react in that exact moment of sudden blinding panic? Just hold on to that feeling for a second, because that is exactly where our story is heading. All right, so our story kicks off with a guy named Tony. And around his region, Tony was universally known as the Happy Hat Maker. He lived in a small town, spending his days carefully crafting these amazing hats to sell in the neighboring villages. He wasn't rich, not by any stretch of the imagination, but he absolutely loved what he did and poured his heart and soul into every single piece he created. But we really need to understand the stakes of Tony's life here, because his survival literally depended on selling these hats day by day. We're not talking about a corporate business with a massive safety net. For Tony, his daily profit was quite literally his daily bread. He had to take today's earnings just to buy the fabric to make tomorrow's hats. It was a razor-thin margin for error. And yet, despite that constant financial pressure, he remained a remarkably joyful guy. And he wasn't just making your standard run-of-the-mill caps either. Tony was a master craftsman. He sold these unique, incredibly delicate silk hats. Seriously, the villagers had never seen anything like them. We're talking vibrant reds and blues, covered in beautiful dots and stripes. Whenever he showed up in a village, people would literally pour out of their houses just to buy them. They loved his work so much, they'd even offer him food and drinks just to get him to stick around longer. But because Tony was in such a rush to get to the next village, he declined all that food, which set him up for a massive mistake. Let's look at this next part, the forgotten warning. Right before he left the village, a wise old man stopped Tony and gave him a very specific, ominous warning. He told him that the road to the next town went straight through a small forest, and he warned him explicitly, "Close your basket well if you pass through. There are annoying monkeys that steal anything." You see, the locals knew this forest was a trap. These monkeys didn't just steal your stuff, they actually mocked people, and everyone had just kind of given up trying to fight them off. So Tony thanks the guy, grabs his hard-earned cash, and heads toward the trees. But here is where human nature totally takes over. Distracted by how successful his morning was, counting his money and suddenly realizing he's actually pretty hungry, Tony just straight up forgot the old man's crucial advice the very second he stepped under the canopy. We can actually trace the exact timeline of innocent, kind of careless choices that marched him straight into a total disaster. At 1 p.m., he strolls into the forest, getting distracted by all the beautiful flowers and fruit. Then, around 2 p.m., he spots a vendor, buys a couple pieces of delicious bread, and sits down under this massive, inviting tree to eat. He's exhausted from traveling, his belly is full of bread, so he decides to just rest his eyes. And the fatal error? Right at 3 p.m., he falls completely fast asleep, leaving his basket full of silk hats wide open. Fast forward a few hours. Tony is out cold. And that brings us to the climax, the monkey's surprise. Out of nowhere, this strange chattering noise from high up in the branches wakes him up. He rubs his eyes, stretches out, and glances down at his basket. And he sees this absolutely devastating number. 1. Just a single hat left in his entire basket. All of those beautiful, dotted, striped silk hats he'd poured his labor into, the ones he desperately needed to buy his fabric for the next day, completely gone. So now, with his entire livelihood wiped out, and this terrifying, chaotic chattering echoing down from the branches high above him, we have to pause and ask, what on earth will Tony do now? He looks up and instantly realizes he wasn't robbed by bandits, it was the monkeys. Suddenly, that old man's warning comes rushing right back to him. This right here perfectly illustrates the sheer contrast of the crisis. On the ground, we have Tony absolutely devastated, totally panicked, knowing he has zero money for food or fabric for tomorrow. And up in the trees, the monkeys. They are joyful, sitting safely out of reach, literally wearing his beautiful silk hats on their heads, laughing and mocking him, exactly like the old man said they would. Now, I think most people in this situation would just break down, cry, or run all the way back to the village in total defeat. But Tony? He doesn't let the panic win. After that initial wave of despair, he forces a mindset shift. His solution? The imitation trick. Let's break down how he figured this out. First, purely on instinct, Tony yells in frustration at the tree, demanding his hats back. But instead of ignoring him, the monkeys aggressively jump up and down and yell right back at him. Tony pauses, he stops reacting, and he starts observing. He realizes they aren't just reacting to the noise, they're actually mimicking his every single move. By just watching them respond to his frustration, he brilliantly discovers their fatal flaw. So the real genius is in how he executes this master plan. He takes that one single hat he has left, he places it right on his own head, he looks up at the monkeys to make sure they're all watching him, then in one swift, forceful motion, he yanks the hat off and slams it onto the dirt. And because it is literally in their nature to mimic, every single monkey up in that tree immediately yanks off their stolen silk hat and hurls it straight to the ground. In a matter of seconds, it was literally raining silk hats. Tony obviously didn't waste a second. He scooped up every last hat, packed his basket super tight, locked it up securely, and marched right out of that forest whistling a happy tune. He reclaimed his livelihood and made it home safely. But let's dig into the deeper meaning here, the lesson learned. Tony didn't win this by using physical force, and he certainly didn't win by screaming in anger. Let's look at the outcomes here. If he had just given into the panic, he would have run away empty-handed, hungry, and totally out of business. But because he forced himself to stay calm, he tapped into the power of observation. He noticed the mimicking, he outsmarted these seemingly unbeatable monkeys, and he saved his entire livelihood. If we put this into modern terms, what Tony used was emotional intelligence. That is the ability to manage your emotions and remain calm, analytical, and strategic when a sudden crisis hits you out of nowhere. Tony effectively took a disastrous, business-ending financial loss and flipped it into a massive victory simply by keeping his cool when it mattered the most. He also showed us what incredible mindfulness and alertness looks like in action. It proves that if you stay present and observant, rather than just reacting blindly to how unfair a situation is, you can often find a solution hiding right above your head. I mean, think about it. The monkey's greatest strength, their mocking behavior, became the exact tool Tony used to defeat them. But he only saw it because he was actually paying attention. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final provocative question. Look, we all face unexpected monkeys in our lives, right? Sudden crises that threaten to empty our baskets. So, the next time life unexpectedly steals your hats, will you just yell at the tree in a panic, or will you stay calm enough to find that hidden solution? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating story with me, and I challenge you to carry Tony's alertness into whatever obstacles you face next.